The one thing that I never look forward to at the start of a new year is the movies that come out in January, because let's be honest, they're never good. There's no good movies that come out in January, and I'm happy to say that that tradition is still being upheld. So The Grudge is about a house that is haunted from somebody that was killed, and people who encounter the house are then haunted themselves, and it never leaves you. That's kind of just the premise of this movie. It follows a few different families over a couple of years and their interactions with the house and kind of how that all connects, and while detectives are investigating the crimes and stuff like that. This also is, I think, the fourth version of this Grudge story. It started out as a Japanese film, and then there were a couple American remakes, and I haven't seen any of those, so I'm kind of going in from a different perspective than other people might be going into it because I haven't seen those movies. But when you are talking about a reboot or a remake, you don't really want to look at the original version all that much. You just want to look at the version of the movie that you're watching. You want to see, is it coherent? Is it entertaining? Is it a good movie? And the Grudge 2020 edition, it's not. Now, is it Cats level bad? Absolutely not. And it's going to be really hard for a movie to be as bad as that was. But honestly, this isn't as bad as it is just boring. It's not a very exciting movie. I think the biggest problem that this movie has is that it tries to be a drama. It tries to focus on these individual families and how they're interacting and how they're dealing with the grudge. And it makes for a really boring experience because you go through huge stretches of time where there's not really any scares happening except for maybe one jump scare, and then it's back to 15 minutes of filler drama. And when there are thrills and scares, they're really lame. They're just cheap jump scares. There's nothing like inherently scary about this story. Your first priority when you're making a horror movie is that it should be scary, that it should be thrilling. And this movie just wasn't on any level. In all honesty, it's super predictable and it's super cliched. It's like any other horror movie that you've seen before in terms of like a concept or scares or something like that. It's just so basic and it's so surface level. Seriously, there is so much room for creativity in horror movies as a genre. You can create your own rules, tell your own type of story. Take Hereditary, Us, The Witch. There's so many different stories that you can tell, and all three of those movies are so creative and so inventive and do new things that no other horror movie has done before. I just found it to be super boring and so uninteresting and predictable. Another thing that just didn't work for this movie is that it takes place over 3 different timelines in 3 different years, and it makes the movie really hard to follow because there's no like distinctions between the 3 timelines other than the people, because they all take place pretty much in the same house. And so you have no sense of when you are in the story. You easily forget like what year each thing is taking place in. And so it makes the movie really hard to follow in that respect because there's just no differentiation between the two except for the actors. And I'm not bashing nonlinear storytelling in any way. In fact, I quite enjoy it. Quentin Tarantino is like a master at it. But in this case, it just felt like 3 different movies that were just crammed together because they knew they probably wouldn't get sequels out of it. Now, one thing that I did actually kind of like about this movie is that it focuses a lot more on the detectives and the police officers. I thought that was really interesting. In a lot of horror movies, you just focus on the people that it's affecting or the family or whatever it is. But in this case, it focuses on the actual solving of what's happening, which I thought was a pretty interesting angle to look at this movie from. And had this been a better script, a better crafted story, that could have been way more interesting than it was. But it just doesn't work because the rest of the movie, it just doesn't do anything to support that idea. In the end, The Grudge, it wasn't painful to watch, but it just wasn't a well-crafted movie. I found it boring, bland, predictable, and it just lacked originality completely. I'm going to give The Grudge a Jim Halpert face. You know, this really sucks that a movie this bad, I have to call it my favorite movie of the year so far. This is the only one that I've seen that has come out in 2020. So can't wait for Underwater to come out, that's for sure. If you liked this review, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You'll be one of the first ones to know when I release a new review. Be sure to follow me on social media. You can find all those links down in the description below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.